Environment and Rural Affairs. We now move to the Minister for Communities, and I call Mark Durkin.
Mr. Speaker, question 1.
Minister.
Equality impact assessment on the reduction in the rate support grant.
Mr. Durkin.
I thank the Minister for his answer, and I blame the Business Office for the question. My initial question that I will now ask as a supplementary was actually on the independent review of rate support grant, as I understand, commissioned by the Minister from Business Consultancy Service. Is that there's been a drastic cut in rate support grant that's gone from £20 million to under £5 million over 15 years. But does the Minister recognise the role of rate support grant in tackling regional inequality, and will the Minister make the case at the Executive to restore and ring-fence this vital piece of funding?
Minister.
Well, first of all, the member mentions the review. He'll understand that that is ongoing. I expect that to be completed in mid-November 2024. Obviously, I, as Minister, will do all that I can to seek as much resource as I can for my department and all of the areas that are affected by that. In terms of regional balance, it'll be up to the councils themselves to decide where that money is spent, but instead of it being a regional balance issue, it's about a wealth versus need issue. That's what the rate support grant seems to or tries to support, and certainly I'll do all that I can to make sure that I get the necessary resources for everything within my department, including local government.
Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, can you confirm that when this review is completed, will you define what essential services are within councils to ensure that they can provide those if there is a reduction?
Minister.
Well, I do think that definition lies with me, but if there are specific issues that she thinks that I need to take on board as part of the outcome of the review, I'd be happy to do that.
Kingston.
I wish to ask the Minister, what is his assessment of the impact on Section 75 groups regarding the future of rate supports grant?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the councils have informed us that the money that comes from the rate support grant is used in, quote, assisting all their ratepayers' rate bills. Therefore, in terms of policy impact of some of the Section 75 categories, the level of impact by DFC is either considered minor or no impact because it affects everybody in the same way. It's not for specific groups.
Ciara Ferguson.
Minister, given that the 7 councils are rural by nature, did the Minister conduct a rural needs assessment in relation to the reduction of the rate support grant? Thank you.
Minister.
So, as I mentioned in my previous comment, the funding, as I understand it, is not used for those purposes. It is used to support all ratepayers, so I don't believe that has been carried out. But that review is being done. That will be with me shortly, and I, of course, will take on board all of the issues that have been raised.
Crawford.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this is an issue for the Housing Executive, and the Chief Executive has advised me that they do not record data by parliamentary constituency, but rather by local government district. During 23-24, I can inform the member that the Housing Executive received 1,288 homeless presentations within Mid and East Antrim, and a further 1,110 presentations within the Causeway Coast and Glens local government district.
Mr. Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer thus far. The Minister will be aware that homelessness is not confined to the hours of 9 to 5. Can I ask the Minister to outline what measures he has taken to prevent homelessness and safeguard the out-of-hours service provided by the Northern Ireland Housing Executive?
Well, the member's absolutely right. Obviously, this is a decision that the Housing Executive have taken, and I'm sure it is not one that they want to have taken. From my point of view, what am I doing? I want to do everything I can to make sure that homelessness is brief, it's rare and it's non-recurrent. I want to make sure that the funding that is available to us is used, where possible, to prevent homelessness in the first place. And that is the goal that I have set. We are spending considerable sums of money in temporary accommodation provision. I want to see more of that money spent on homelessness prevention.
Paul Frey.
Speaker, can I ask the Minister, will he outline what services are currently provided in North Antrim to tackle homelessness?
Yes, there are a range of services that my department and the Housing Executive offer in order to support the prevention of homelessness. We also have voluntary sector hostel accommodation for single households and families, refuges for victims of domestic abuse, single-lets and dispersed temporary accommodation. The Housing Executive is the commissioning body for supporting people schemes and makes decisions on the location of schemes in consultation with relevant partners. And I can confirm to the member that across Mid and East Antrim there are 84 units across 7 supporting people homeless schemes, 133 single lets and 37 units of Housing Executive hostel or dispersed temporary accommodation. In Causeway Coast and Glens there were 25 units in 2 supporting people homeless schemes, including a voluntary sector hostel for single households and a refuge for victims of domestic abuse, 40 single lets and 28 units of Housing Executive hostel or dispersed temporary accommodation.
Honourable Holland.
Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answers so far. I recently met with Bernardos, who deal with children who are leaving care and who have experience of homelessness. Are there any additional supports that the department can be putting in place, particularly around working with the Northern Trust or other health trusts, with the knowledge that those young people will be leaving care and will be entering into potentially a homeless situation?
Minister.
Well, this is a very important issue, and overall when we deal with homelessness it does require a whole of government approach, because the reasons for homelessness are varied and complex, and we know that young people leaving care or people with mental health or addiction issues are more likely to face homelessness. So to prevent and to resolve homelessness we will take a collective joined up approach across departments and statutory agencies. My department leads on the development and oversight of the Interdepartmental Homelessness Action Plan, and we chair the Homelessness Strategy Steering Group, which includes the Departments of Health, Justice and Education, statutory agencies and the voluntary sector.
Timothy Gaston.
Much, Mr Speaker. Minister, there was a housing development completed in summer 2023 by Choice Housing in George Street in Ballymena. That was designed to be for one-bedroom general needs properties. Does your department have any oversight for the change from general needs to emergency accommodation that has been allowed to happen in that block of flats? Why I asked, Minister, is that 18 months on, them flats are still vacant, but their homeless rates going up through the roof. Have you any oversight to ensure that these flats are open for people so they can get off the streets and into housing that can support their needs?
Minister.
Well, I'm certainly happy to find out further information on the specific issue that the member raises, but he will be aware that commissioning decisions for supporting people services are a matter for the Housing Executive, which is the commissioning body for the programme. I understand that the Living Rivers Trust, currently located on Linnenhall Street in Ballymena, is funded through the Supporting People programme to provide that short-term accommodation-based support for single homeless males. And following initial conversations with Lighthouse, Choice Housing Association approached the Housing Executive in late 2022 with a proposal to change the designation of the George Street property, which was nearing completion, from general needs accommodation to supported accommodation with provision for clients experiencing homelessness and related issues. The Housing Executive was supportive of this proposal, as having reviewed the activity of the pipeline schemes and proposals from housing associations within the Ballymena area. They were satisfied that this aligned with identified need, and they say that this enabled the Housing Executive to maximise support across different need groups and look favourably on the opportunity being presented to address unmet priority homeless provision in Ballymena. That is the information I have on this at the moment, but if I do have a further update, I'm happy to provide the member with that.
Daniel McCrossan.
Mr Speaker, could the Minister tell me how many times the Homeless Strategy Steering Group has met since he took up office, and during that time how many have presented as homeless, citing loss of private rented accommodation as the reason?
Minister.
I hope the member understands that I don't have those figures at my disposal, not right now, but I of course will be happy to write to him with that information.
William Irwin.
Question number 3, Mr Speaker.
Sir.
Mr Speaker, I have been briefed by officials on the proposed listing of Marlborough House, and they have shared with me the proposed listing report and its case for special interest in architectural and historical terms, and this is the relevant statutory test. My officials have also advised that an independent report was commissioned from a heritage architect by the Department of Finance, the owners of Marlborough House, to consider the Department's proposal to list. This reviewed the Historic Environment Division's report and did not dispute any of the claims. Senior officials in DOF have made officials in my department aware that DOF intends to vacate the building and dispose of the site in early 2026. DOF has also made DFC aware that the listing of Marlborough House might, in their view, have a detrimental impact either on the future viability of the site for use by another public sector body or on any potential sale of the building should it come in to the open market. My department has met with the Department of Finance and with councillors from Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Council and extended the listing process to allow time for this. In the interest of maintaining the neutrality of listing decisions, the established practice in DFC and its predecessor departments since 1974 is that the senior official makes a final determination of a listing proposal.
Mr. Irwin.
Can I thank the Minister for his response? Can I ask the Minister, if Marlborough House is listed, does that mean it cannot be demolished?
Even if the building is listed, that does not mean that it cannot be demolished. All planning applications related to listed buildings are determined by the local council. They assess the merits of the building's special architectural or historic interest against current planning policy. My department will be a statutory consultee in the planning process, but ultimately that will be a decision for the council to make.
Gary Carroll. Mr.
79.
Mr. Carroll.
Thank you, Minister. It's been reported that the LCC, who you and the Education Minister met recently, have raised their opposition to Níoscail na Síolta in East Belfast. Given the ongoing intimidation, attacks and the whipped-up sectarianism against the school and those who use it, will you take this opportunity to condemn the hate and welcome the school in East Belfast?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't answer questions on behalf of the Department for Education. Of course, wherever it takes place, if intimidation is happening, regardless of the situation or scenario, you'll find that I will always condemn that. But this was not an issue that was raised with me during the meeting that he refers to, because it doesn't fall within the remit of the Department.
McGillans.
Sport, as you know, plays an important role in building community cohesion. I'm advised that East Belfast GAA wrote to you on the 18th of September requesting to meet but have still not received a response. What actions are you taking to urgently meet with East Belfast GAA to demonstrate your support in the face of ongoing intimidation in East Belfast?
Mr.
Well, let me again reiterate my opposition to any intimidation whatsoever, wherever it comes from. It's absolutely wrong. It shouldn't happen, and I and my party have been categorical on that matter. If there's anything that I can do to assist, I would be happy to do so, and I'm more than happy to look again at the invitation that was sent. I don't remember that particular invite. You'll be aware that I've got over 700 invitations, but I'm more than happy to look at that again. But I think that we can all be clear around this House that intimidation is wrong and there should be no place for it in our society.
Peter Martin.
Thank you very much, Minister. You mentioned in your first answer how many groups you haven't been able to meet yet. Could you outline to the House how many groups you have met in your time in office?
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have so far accepted 395 invitations from various organisations, individuals in that come under the remit of my department. I think it is important that we put that on record, because there has been a lot of controversy in relation to this over the last number of weeks. It is not possible for me to meet everybody. Sometimes there are diary clashes, sometimes they're not the responsibility of the department, sometimes it's more appropriate to meet with officials in the first instance. But I will say this, meetings are important. I continue to carry out my functions in that regard. However, I believe that action is what is most important of all. getting things done for the people that we represent, and I'm pleased of the record that I have in this department. We have been able to make significant progress along a number of different lines within my department's responsibility. In terms of housing, we're bringing forward the housing supply strategy. We've achieved a standalone commitment in the programme for government for housing, the first time that's ever happened, using financial transactions capital for intermediate rent and for move-on accommodation for homeless people, more money for supporting people. We've put the housing executive revitalisation on the agenda, and we're pushing forward with private rented sector regs. The Northern Ireland Football Fund lay dormant for years. We're now making progress on that. I ensured we had an Olympic celebration that was worthy of the success of our athletes. We're moving forward in terms of easing charity regulation. We're bringing forward a sign language bill that I've received executive approval for. We've set up the USNI Cultural Working Group, passed the Defective Premises Act, bringing forward an anti-poverty strategy and bringing forward a new approach to heritage, culture and creativity. The meetings are important, actions will matter, and we're actually getting things done in this department.
Carl Hunter.
Minister, recently at an APG, women's groups voiced that they were saddened that they haven't had the chance to meet you yet. I understand that given that you're a minister, your diary is tight for time, but would you ever consider publishing a criteria by which you decide on how to take a meeting?
Minister.
No, I wouldn't, because I don't think that would be a good use of time. I have given examples of why sometimes meetings can't happen. In regards to some of the social inclusion strategies, I've made it clear that I wanted to set out our way forward before we committed to different meetings. Remember, of course, that many of these co-design groups have already been set up and have contributed so far. But I am happy to compare my record of meeting with different groups, and very broad groups, representative of people from right across Northern Ireland. I've accepted almost 400 invitations. I will continue to do as much as I can, but more importantly, I will actually do the work of delivering for people in Northern Ireland.
Here, here. Colin Bradshaw. Sir.
Mr Speaker, work is progressing on the development of the Executive's Irish language strategy. Owing to the cross-cutting nature of the strategy, a cross-departmental working group of senior officials from executive departments is considering the Irish Language Co-Design Group's proposed strategy and action plan, and this is being developed in parallel with an Ulster Scots Language, Heritage and Culture Strategy and Action Plan. Alongside the work of this cross-departmental working group, I am currently considering the next steps in the development of both strategies and actions plans. I will then engage with executive colleagues to ask them to consider and, if content, agree on those next steps.
Ms Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answer. I'm just wondering what conversations you've had with the Executive Office in terms of the new bodies that are being established, with particular reference to the Irish Language Commissioner. Thank you.
Minister.
I've not had any discussions yet with the First or Deputy First Minister on this issue.
Patsy Malone.
Minister. Minister, could you advise how many times the working group has actually met that you referred to, and what's its timetable for actual product?
Minister.
We love to ask questions about meetings in this place. I don't have the information of the exact number of meetings that have taken place, but I will happily provide that to the member.
Minister, do you plan to meet with Conor and Gaeilge in relation to the Irish language strategy or other Irish language groups?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm more than happy to consider all invites that come in, and depending on how the work progresses, I will determine whether it would be useful for me to have a meeting, whether it would be useful for officials to have a meeting, if and when that is considered necessary.
Mr Speaker, Minister, would you agree with me that all minority languages are important here in Northern Ireland, and there's a clear focus by some elements in this House just to pick out one language and not focus on the clear agreements that were made, that all languages will be treated fairly and equitably here in Northern Ireland?
Minister.
Absolutely right. It is important that we treat all languages equally, and there were agreements in place in the past in regards to those. One of the other things I have been able to take forward, of course, is sign language legislation, because we love to talk about diversity and inclusion, but this is a group that often have felt left out. That's why I'm making progress to make sure that they have the ability to fully take part in society.
All right, Harvey.
Question number 6, Mr.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I visited the United States 2 weeks ago, and a major focus of the programme was the upcoming 250th anniversary of the signing of America's Declaration of Independence. And to that end, I met with the America 250 Commission, the National Archives, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian Institute and the White House Historical Association to discuss the work being taken forward by the United States Northern Ireland Cultural Working Group led by my department. I was pleased to announce details of a new programme of cultural and educational activities to mark the 250th anniversary in the United States, but in Northern Ireland as well. And the programme will include lectures, talks, conferences, exchanges of documents, exhibitions and outreach, both in Northern Ireland and in the United States. Prony houses one of the largest collections of immigrant letters and documents in the world, and the programme includes the launch of a special publication by Prony that highlights its Ulster American treasures, and this will form part of a broader programme of outreach working in partnership with the National Archives in Washington DC. The programme will also promote the links that historic Royal Palace and Hillsborough Castle enjoy with founding father Benjamin Franklin, and there is the opportunity to loan items and documents from US institutions. The contribution and influence that the early Ulster Scots migrants made to the traditions and values of the United States of America is significant, and both the President of the United States and the US Special Envoy have acknowledged the common heritage that exists and the contribution the Ulster Scots have made to the United States. So I'm determined to use this anniversary to ensure that we have an opportunity to promote that contribution and shared heritage. And it was clear from the organisations I met in the United States that they are excited to cooperate with Northern Ireland partners in celebrating this historic milestone.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, will you be engaging with UK government counterparts to ensure support for these links to be developed further?
Minister.
Yes, I absolutely will, and the Safeguarding the Union Command paper in January 2020 set out a commitment to support greater outreach and education in the United States to further strengthen understanding of the different traditions in Northern Ireland. And I am determined that we make sure that Northern Ireland has its place and that our distinct and unique identity is highlighted within the United States, and the UK government have a role to play in that as well.
Matthew O'Toole.
Mr Speaker, Minister, I am all in favour actually of you developing this agenda. I think it's really important. I think we should all be proud of the contribution that people from Ulster Scots background made to the United States. I would say, in parenthesis, it would probably have been better to not do this whenever we were sitting and debating homelessness in this chamber. But can I specifically ask, you talked about the importance of the one tradition, as it were, in Northern Ireland. But of course, many of those Ulster Scots migrants spoke the Irish language. They also spoke Lowland Scots. They spoke English. We aren't necessarily all one thing in this place. And can I suggest that whenever he was in Washington having those conversations,
we're here for questions, Mr. O'Toole.
Could he establish the diversity of language that was spoken by those Ulster Scots migrants, and perhaps bring that back in future meetings with stakeholders around Irish language schools? He could perhaps suggest to them that they reflect on that.
Minister.
Well, I think the member's made a critical error here, and he sees this only in terms of language, and that's a problem. This is more about the history and about the heritage and the contribution that was made. That's what I want to emphasise, because I do believe there is a unique Ulster Scots tradition and heritage in the United States. I believe that they, you only have to look at some of the contributions that Ulster Scots have made. Look at the number of US presidents that had Ulster Scots ancestry, including from Carrickfergus in my own constituency with Andrew Jackson. But you also have those that signed the Declaration of Independence. John Dunlap, who was one of the first to print copies of the Declaration of Independence, and the people that I spoke to and the relationships that were forged and the agreements that were made with those in the United States were based on a shared understanding. And in fact, people were quite excited about the opportunities that can come from this, because these are often untold stories, and I want to make sure they're brought into the light. I want people to understand what it was that people from this part of the world contributed to the development of the United States. And so I welcome the fact that he does think that that is a good idea, and it's something I'll continue to do.
Only.
Mr Speaker, and thanks to the Minister for his answer so far. Given the strong historic and enduring connections between Northern Ireland and the United States, can I ask the Minister if there will be resources for schools and community groups to come together and hold celebration events to mark the anniversary of American independence?
Minister.
Well, I certainly hope that people across Northern Ireland will take this as an opportunity to celebrate the contribution that people from here made to the founding and development of that nation. Funding is certainly something we're currently exploring, and I hope that we will be able to secure funding from within our existing budgets as well as additional support from elsewhere to make sure that this can be properly celebrated. But also we need to make sure that we leave open opportunities for this to create a greater benefit from Northern Ireland moving forward as well.
And Dodds.
Number 7.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, given the Sign Language Bill's cross-cutting nature, I have received executive approval for my officials to engage formally with the Office of Legislative Counsel for the drafting of clauses for a bill which will recognise and promote British Sign Language and Irish Sign Language. Engagement with the Office of Legislative Counsel is ongoing, and the drafting of clauses is well advanced, and therefore it is my intention to bring a draft Sign Language Bill for executive approval at the earliest opportunity. I believe that the Sign Language Bill will have a significantly positive and beneficial impact on the local deaf community, and I look forward to delivering legislation that will improve the lives of many by enabling greater access to information and services which society at large takes for granted. My department is currently investing in increasing British Sign Language and Irish Sign Language interpreting capacity, which will be vital to increasing accessibility to public services, which will be a central aim of the bill. However, as the legislation is cross-cutting in nature, I will be seeking executive approval for the central allocation of the resources necessary to deliver on the policy intent of the legislation.
Ms. Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think in many ways, Minister, we talk a lot about inclusivity in this House, but this is a real move towards inclusivity of a section of our community that has often found themselves to be invisible. Given that you've talked about the cross-cutting nature of the bill, what commitments have you had from the Finance Minister in order to provide funding for the increase in interpreters that are necessary, and indeed from the Education Minister to improve the lives of young people who suffer from these challenges?
Minister.
Well, I certainly agree with the comments that the member has made in relation to ensuring that people can play a full role in society and, most importantly, of course, get access to basic public services that we so often can take for granted. This has received the drafting, permission to draft the bill has received approval from the First and Deputy First Minister, and I hope that other ministers, and in particular the Finance Minister and Education Minister, as she has mentioned, will ensure that we have the proper allocation of resources so that we can deliver on the policy intent of this legislation and make things better for a section of our society that so often feel like they are on the margins.
David Brooks. Question to you, Mr. Speaker. Sure.
Mr. Speaker, I undertook a series of engagements in Washington DC, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania and Toronto, Canada during my recent trip to the US and Canada. As I have already mentioned today, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence presents us with a unique opportunity to promote the historical links between Northern Ireland and the United States. But I also took the opportunity to meet with the Harkin International Disability Employment Group. They met in Belfast in 2022, and I also met with Microsoft at their Innovation and Policy Centre for a roundtable discussion on disability employment. I also had very constructive discussions with Jennifer Sheehy, the Assistant Secretary for Labour, and her senior officials on disability employment-related issues, and we're following up on the outcomes of those meetings with officials. I also met with Consul General from the United Kingdom in Canada, the United Kingdom Ambassador to the United States, and the Irish Ambassador to the United States. I also visited DC United to speak at an investment in sports seminar, and I had the opportunity to meet with the club owners, senior executive and potential investors, and I'm pleased to inform the House today that we have a number of visits from investors coming to Northern Ireland as a result of that engagement. I also attended a series of events in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and joined with visitors from Grace Hill to mark the 4 Moravian church settlements being designated as a UNESCO Transnational Cultural World Heritage Site. That is a big deal. We have another World Heritage Site in Northern Ireland, and I was pleased to represent the UK on that visit. And I also had the opportunity to engage with the United States Deputy Secretary of State.
We now move to topical questions. I call Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, Casement Park is not going to host the European Championships in 2028. That we know. We also know the UK Government has given a significant uplift in funding to the Executive. We know the GAA is willing to accept a smaller, less ambitious stadium. What are you going to do now to ensure Casement Park is finally built?
Let me repeat what I've said before, which is that there is a commitment from this Executive which I stand by. The sum of £62.5 million is originally agreed in 2011. The grant was given to Windsor Park and the grant was given to Ravenhill, and those stadiums were developed. Casement Park has, for a variety of reasons, as he will be aware, not progressed, and as a result the cost has gone up. We do not have the budget to increase the resource that is there for that at this time. Therefore, we need to be looking at what is possible within the budget envelope that we have and what other sources of revenue are available.
Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You were speaking earlier on about the contribution Ulster people made to the United States. Let me indulge in a good Ulster quality, which is straight talking, and encourage you to do the same, Minister. Are you saying that you are not going to budge from the £62 million that was agreed more than a decade ago? Because if that is your position, then I'm afraid that is a real problem. You were in Washington DC talking about investment in sports. In Belfast, in this city, Gales and everybody else who wants to see Casement Park developed deserve clarity from you. Are you or are you not going to invest in Casement Park beyond the £62 million?
Minister.
I am not a magician. I do not have a blank cheque where I can get money together and just say, yes, whatever it's going to cost, here is the money that is available. To be fair, I have been crystal clear on this issue, and I have been honest on this issue about the funds that are available. I was not the one that was standing saying that things were going to be built and things were going to be done in time when that was never going to be the case. I've always have been straight and I've been honest. I was not the one, like members of his party, that were standing with objectors, which held this up, which contributed to judicial reviews, which put the case up. Because I know there's a game that is played sometimes by members on the other side of the House. Let's blame unionists and let's blame the DUP for everything. I wasn't messing about in terms of safety certificates for Casement Park. I wasn't standing with objectors. We are keeping our end of the deal, but he has to understand the budgetary environment that we currently find ourselves in.
Alan Chambers isn't in his place. I call Melissa McHugh.
Concarla. Minister, given the number of people and families currently living in temporary accommodation, can you outline what are the criteria, checks and balances used to assess the appropriateness of non-standard accommodation which is currently being used?
Well, look, we have far too many people living in temporary accommodation. That's obviously not acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable for anybody to be in temporary accommodation for any prolonged period of time. These are obviously operational matters for the Housing Executive, and it's up to them to decide what meets the circumstances of the individuals who are in need.
Mr. McHugh.
Minister, but what support is given to those people placed temporary accommodation outside of the area in which they normally reside, and how is this the department, or what is the department's contribution to reducing over-reliance on such accommodation?
Well, look, the easiest thing that we can do to deal with the over-reliance on emergency accommodation is to make sure that we have more housing in Northern Ireland. That's what I am absolutely committed to achieving. There's a number of ways that we can do that. I will be bringing forward the housing supply strategy very, very soon to make sure that we, for the first time, have a cross-departmental plan in place to actually deal with this issue. The other big thing that we can do, and I encourage the support of all members around this House, is to make sure that the government confirm that in terms of borrowing, the Housing housing executive can borrow on the same basis as housing associations elsewhere in the UK. I want to do everything that I can to make sure that we assist those that are dealing with homelessness right now, but in the longer term I want to make it easier and cheaper to build more homes, and that's where our focus should be.
I call Stuart Dixon.
Speaker, Minister, can you give the House an update on the application process for the Northern Ireland Football Fund?
Minister.
Great progress has been made in terms of the Northern Ireland Football Fund. We're finalising the application process, and as I have said in this House and elsewhere, I hope that that will be open towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year, with the first letters of offer being issued by the end of this financial year. And that is fantastic progress that we have made since I have come into office, because for far too long that was held up. Money was available and no effort was made to get it out to clubs that needed it most. That has changed since I took over the leadership of this department, and we're going to have real delivery within months.
Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Minister. Minister, while I appreciate that you have made some progress with regards to this matter, nevertheless, when you launched the project in May of this year, you did promise that an application process would be completed by the end of this year. Where are you in terms of physical application forms for those to apply?
Mr.
Well, I stand by the comments that I have made. That is absolutely my intention. I hope that that will be open, but certainly, as I've said, letters of offer, most importantly, out the door by the end of this financial year. And I can assure the member that I'm doing everything that I can, and my team is doing everything that they can to make sure that those deadlines are met, because every day that passes, this money is worth less and less, and we have been dealing with that for far too long, and that changes now.
Beggar.
Could the Minister provide an update on how many young people in the North are currently homeless?
Sure.
I'm more than happy to provide the exact information. I don't have that in front of me now, but I can say that the answer is far too much. As I've said, in response to other questions that have been asked of me today and in the past, we have far too many people that are homeless, far too many people that are waiting on lists. That number is going up all the time. What we need to make sure that we do is build more homes across all tenures to make sure that people aren't facing this, because this has huge implications for the rest of their lives as well, in terms of their health, in terms of their education, in terms of their well-being. We need to get more homes built, and that's why I have progressed a number of items, bringing forward the housing supply strategy, pushing the Northern Ireland Housing Executive revitalisation, improving the private rented sector as well, doing everything that we can to ensure more homes and better homes for people right across Northern Ireland.
Mr. Beggar.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. And nearly a third of young people under the age of 18 are currently homeless. Would the Minister and his department consider the rights of children and young people when developing policy and solutions?
Of course, we always take on board the concerns and the rights of children. I'm particularly concerned about the impact that the housing shortage has right now in terms of those children who are living in temporary accommodation, which is often far away from their support networks in terms of families, but also their schools as well. It's an additional burden. That's what I mean whenever I say the lack of housing provision has an impact on educational outcomes. Inevitably, that has an impact on health outcomes, sometimes justice system outcomes as well. Which is why I am committed to doing everything that I can while I am in this office to push that forward and make homes easier to build and make sure we have more homes.
So you've talked about enabling the housing executive to borrow against their rents that would raise income for building new houses. What's the role of the executive in enabling us to do that?
Sir.
I'm sorry, does the member mean the housing executive or the Northern Ireland executive? Well, if she means the housing executive, I'm working closely with them on this, and they are ready to go once they get the confirmation. They have a plan in place so that they can take advantage of that rule change and start investing more in the homes that we have and ensuring that we can build more homes as well. If she's referring to what the Northern Ireland executive can do, there is actually a limited role for this, for the executive, because there's not going to be a substantial change to the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. It's more a confirmation of a borrowing rule rather than needing, for example, primary legislation that would need to go through the executive.
Sugden.
Yes, Minister, you've answered both. So I suppose really it's just for clarity, is how quick can we progress in this, given this significant need for housing?
Sure.
Whenever this issue is being touched upon, I engaged with the housing executive and I said to them, what can you do now to make sure that you're ready? Because I don't want this rule change to come along and then all of us are looking around at each other saying what comes next. So I wanted to make sure that there was a plan in place so that we can move forward on day one, and I have full confidence in Gráinne Long and her team to make sure that happens.
Deborah Erskine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Communities has more civil servants than any other department, and the Minister will be aware of this, which was produced by the Department of Finance, and it is the inclusive language guide for the Northern Ireland Civil Service, which advises against using phrases such as ladies and gentlemen, suggests using MUX instead of miss, and encourages people to share their pronouns. What is the Minister's view on this guide?
Minister.
Well, I think the member could guess what my view on this is. Look, I'm sure that there were good intentions behind this guide, but let's be clear, there's a lot of nonsense in it as well. Not being able to say the word miss, not being able to say ladies and gentlemen. My favourite actually was that you should not say that someone is coasting towards retirement. You should say that they have a valuable contribution to make to the team. Look, I think a lot of this is utter rubbish, and I think people should have more common sense in regards to this issue. I'm actually particularly concerned about Stonewall's inclusion in this. Stonewall have been largely discredited in some of the work that they have done, and it's disappointing that the Department of Finance are still using Stonewall in this information.
Ms. Erskine.
Yes, and I thank the Minister for his answer, because given the amount of pressure that there is within our public services, and given the fact that this probably will have cost in terms of putting this document together, what would be the Minister's advice on this guide to civil servants within his own department?
Sure.
Well, I certainly wouldn't be encouraging civil servants in my department to pay too much attention to it. But what I would say is, if you look at the intention of this, it's about making sure that we treat people in the right way. And I think that we should use our common sense. I believe that we should treat other people as we would want to be treated. I think that's a much better way to go forward than being condemned for using phrases such as ladies and gentlemen.
Dan Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, the recent announcement in the budget on the national minimum wage means that in England 61,000 more carers will be able to access carers allowance, and 7,000 more in Scotland. Do you know how many more carers in Northern Ireland will be able to access carers allowance as a result of the announcement in terms of the minimum wage, and confirm the process for Northern Ireland following in England and Wales' footsteps?
Minister.
Well, I'll certainly get that number for the member, but I can confirm to you that we will be following in the footsteps. There will be some legislation that we will be required to put through, but my understanding is that we will have that in place for April 2025, subject to some agreement with DWP. But I think that this is one good thing, maybe, that has come from the budget, something to be welcomed, and I'm more than happy to ensure that my department plays its role to make sure that that change can go through.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. In Northern Ireland, there are over 220,000 people providing unpaid care for ill, disabled family members. They save the Northern Ireland Executive up to £5.8 billion per year, but yet they are not specifically mentioned within the programme for government. Will you ensure that these people who provide such a valuable contribution to Northern Ireland have more recognition within the programme for government?
Minister.
First of all, I think everyone should just take stock of what the member has just said. £5.8 billion that the carers in Northern Ireland contribute. If they were not there, that would be an incredible cost that would be put on the public purse, one that we simply could not do ourselves. So I think that we all need to recognise the invaluable work of carers, the contribution that they make, and applaud them and congratulate them for that. And we should be doing everything that we can to support them because of the incredible contribution that they make and because of the difference that they are making day and daily in people's lives. In terms of recognition within the Executive, I'm more than happy to write to the First and Deputy First Minister and Executive colleagues and outline to them the importance of carers and try and secure agreement so that we can have that proper recognition and support.
Claire Sugden has given notice of an urgent oral question to the Minister of Justice.